Jet engines screamed behind me as the heat from the exhaust soaked through my dress shirt. My wife was laughing, loudly, one of those artificial, high-pitched cackles she reserves for her boardroom audience. That same boardroom was now climbing the steps of the company jet, clutching branded gift bags and half-finished flutes of champagne. I was holding a suitcase. No bag, no drink, no invite. Just a quiet ultimatum between my fingers. Don't do this, I told her. No anger. No pleading. Just the weight of it. She didn't hesitate. Just spun on one heel, sunglasses already down. Have fun flying commercial, she said, as if that was the punchline to some inside joke I wasn't supposed to get. The kind of joke where you're the one left standing on the pavement. The door hissed shut. The jet didn't take off right away. No, it lingered there, almost like they wanted me to hear the laughter bleeding through the fuselage. See the silhouettes clinking glasses. Smug shapes in tailored suits, raising toasts to another quarter of dominance. I didn't flinch, just stood there as my tie flapped against my chest and the sun baked the top of my head. I didn't blink until the turbine whine faded into the horizon. Then I checked my watch. Right on schedule. I took 3 steps back from the yellow line, opened my phone, and dialed. The line didn't ring, it connected instantly. Activate it, I said. There was a pause on the other end. Then a calm voice replied, confirming. Are you authorizing resignation under Clause 14? Yes. Another pause. Understood. You're aware of the cascade effect this will trigger. I'm counting on it. I hung up and turned toward the black car that had been waiting behind a nearby hangar, its lights already on. This is where I should probably tell you what I do. Who I am. Why the name Virion Tech, the name on their custom luggage tags, only exists because of a shadow clause in a very old agreement. But the truth is, none of them ever asked. For years, I played the supportive spouse, the charming +1 at galas, the man in the corner who did something in consulting. When the paperwork went through, my name wasn't listed, just an anonymous signatory via a trust nobody in the company cared to audit. Because why would they? I was just her husband. Now they'd learn. But not through shouting. Not through scandal. Through silence and signatures. Through a few lines of text they skimmed years ago, and one clause buried in the fine print. Clause 14. Before I headed back to the hotel, I glanced one last time toward the sky. They'd be airborne by now, toasting themselves, high-fiving over a successful pitch to yet another multinational who'd never know their data infrastructure was now unstable. Funny thing is, none of this would have happened if she'd just treated me like I mattered. If she hadn't tried to win in front of the board by publicly reducing me to nothing. Not even by words, but by omission, erasure. But she did. And now, every time that jet climbs, it's running on paperwork I just made obsolete. By the way, if you're still listening, and you're the kind of person who's ever been underestimated, overlooked, or dismissed by someone who thought they had all the power, go ahead and follow. More than 90% of you listen without subscribing, but hitting that button actually motivates my team to keep these stories coming. Anyway, back at the hotel, I changed shirts, opened my laptop, and entered a one-time code from a black key fob. A simple dashboard appeared. Resignation in progress. I clicked confirm. The real fun hadn't even started yet. The hotel room was beige. Beige walls, beige curtains, beige air. The kind of place meant for business travelers who don't ask questions and never stay long enough to notice the smell of recycled air in the carpet. I dropped the suitcase on the chair, still zipped. Didn't bother unpacking. Just pulled out the laptop, a nondescript black slab with no brand name, and placed it on the desk like I was performing surgery. The screen flickered once, then required a retinal scan. A second later, a passphrase prompt appeared. I typed it in slowly, deliberately, not because I was nervous, but because I wanted to savor every keystroke. Each letter was another nail in the coffin of their perceived control. The dashboard loaded. Virion Tech IP Holdings. A name nobody on the board had ever bothered to Google deeply, let alone audit. They thought it was some offshore legal formality, one of those shell companies rich men used to avoid taxes. And it was. But it was also the spine of every patent they'd ever built a product on. Guess who wrote those patents? Not their current legal team. Not the boozy Harvard grad with the Bluetooth earpiece. Me. Every product pitch, every quarterly projection, every glowing article in Wired or Fast Company, built on my sentences. My phrases. My clauses. But I never asked for public credit. I asked for protection. For a firewall between myself and the circus. She said she understood. Stay anonymous. Stay safe. She used to say, back when she still thought I was the smartest man she knew. Now she thought I was luggage. I opened the Final Acts folder. Inside were 3 documents: a resignation letter, a cascading termination clause trigger notification, a media push file. I selected all 3, dragged them to the encrypted upload field, paused, then clicked send. The screen blinked. Status, sent. Then I waited. It didn't take long. About 47 minutes later, the first headline hit one of the smaller tech insider blogs. Key legal partner resigns from Virion Tech IP Holdings. The post was short, bare bones, citing anonymous sources, noting that a major unseen player had just detached himself from the company's foundational legal backbone. No name, no photos, but anyone paying attention to Virion Tech's rise would know the implications. I refreshed the page again. Now it was on 2 more blogs. Then a tweet. I leaned back in the chair. No fist pumps. No monologue. Just stillness. This wasn't about rage. Rage is messy, sloppy. Rage leaves fingerprints. This was about control, precision, consequence. I opened a private message from a burner app and typed a line to someone I hadn't spoken to in over a year. Phase 1 complete. Watch the secondary triggers. They replied with a single emoji. Chess knight. I shut the laptop. Somewhere, maybe still mid-flight, her champagne glass was probably half full. Maybe they were talking about next steps, or mocking the nervous compliance officer who had raised concerns last year about licensing audits. And maybe, if I timed it right, the notification about my resignation would hit the inboxes of their in-house counsel just as the plane taxied to a private hangar. I wasn't in a rush. She had handed me humiliation. I handed her the quiet beginning of systemic collapse, clause by clause, just like I'd written it. The jet hit cruising altitude, and the first wave of self-congratulations began to swirl like clockwork. Glasses clinked, shoes came off, and someone put on a playlist labeled Boardroom Bangers. I wish I were joking. Hell of a trip, muttered Jerry from Product Strategy, already on his 3rd refill. And that presentation? Nailed it. I swear, Meredith, you could sell a toaster to a Tesla. Meredith, my wife, my soon-to-be former CO wife, was perched like royalty, one heel tucked under her, sipping slow from a tall, thin flute. She basked in the attention, the smirks, the shoulder pats. Not one mention of the tarmac. Not one glance toward the empty seat. Just careful laughter and forward momentum, like nothing had happened. Her phone buzzed. She ignored it, eyes locked on the in-flight screen mirroring their pitch deck, now looped and muted. Then it buzzed again, more insistent this time. She glanced at the screen, rolled her eyes, and answered with the clipped tone she reserved for anyone who didn't come with a title. This better be Meredith. The voice on the other end didn't wait. It was heavy, clipped, and very not amused. It's Alan. We're seeing movement in the secondary market. She blinked. What kind of movement? A legal departure. Someone just filed resignation documents from Virion Tech IP Holdings, tied directly to the patents you pitched this morning. She sat upright. We don't know the name, but he's marked as the co-author of the entire intellectual property framework. Not just oversight. Authorship. Do you understand what I'm saying? There was a beat of silence. Then, your husband. That's who you flew commercial today, right? That guy. Who is he? Her hand trembled. Slightly. Just enough that the flute tilted and a few drops caught the back of her wrist. She didn't notice. Across from her, someone finally registered the shift in her face. Mark, the only board member with the faintest understanding of legal infrastructure, leaned forward, squinting like he was trying to read a contract from memory. He was on the IP chain, he said, mostly to himself. Wait, your husband. She covered the mic, hissed. No. He just consulted early on. He didn't stay involved. Mark raised an eyebrow. Then why is he listed on the patent's authorship clause? That trust name isn't that. Don't, she snapped. On the other end, Alan continued, voice tight now. We need clarity. Because if that resignation triggers clause revocation, your entire licensing model is compromised. And your silence right now? It's not helping. I'll call you back, she said, and ended the call before he could protest. The cabin had gone weirdly quiet. No music, no banter, just the soft hum of altitude and unspoken math being calculated in real time. Someone coughed. Another board member, Tracy, marketing, broke the silence. Wait, are you telling me your husband just pulled out of our IP structure and none of us knew he was even in it? Meredith's jaw tightened. It's complicated. Complicated. Tracy laughed once, hollow. You just pitched an AI integration built on a license you no longer control. We promised a 5-year roadmap to investors on something that might not legally exist anymore. That's not confirmed, Meredith snapped. But the air had changed. Completely. No one looked relaxed now. Nobody was sipping anything. Phones came out. Keyboards clicked. Mark's brow furrowed deeper. And then came the first headline. Someone showed her their screen. Virion Tech IP Holdings legal partner resigns. Licensing impact under review. Meredith stared at it like it was written in a language she'd never learned. And maybe it was. Because she hadn't read the contract. Not the real one. Not the one I drafted, signed, and buried where only the smart ones would look. Which was to say, not her. By midnight, the boardroom looked like a war bunker lit by iPads and overpriced laptops. Half-eaten sushi sweated under fluorescent lights. Jackets had been abandoned. Ties were crooked. Tracy was pacing barefoot with her heels in one hand, swearing under her breath like it was a new cardio routine. Meredith stood at the head of the table, arms crossed, eyes locked on a projection no one wanted to keep reading. They had looped in legal, compliance, external counsel, and 2 panicked venture capital reps within the hour. Everyone kept saying the same thing. He couldn't have. Not without our knowledge. Not without leaving a trail. But he did. And he didn't. Because no one had ever thought to challenge the silence. At exactly 12:03 a.m., they all received the same email. The subject line was sterile, clinical. Subject, Clause 7.4, Authorship Resignation Consequences. The body of the message was worse. Per the foundational agreement filed under the original patent sequence dated 2012 and revised under silent amendments in 2016, a resignation of an author class signatory, per trust entity 4B, 93, triggers automatic suspension and revocation of associated IP licensing rights within 72 hours. The following assets are affected. VTX Core Framework, Neuroband Predictive Engine, Helix OS Embedded Systems Suite. All licensees must cease usage within the revocation window or face breach penalties under Section 11.2 of International Compliance Statute 4, IP 17. Tracy sat down. Hard. Mark put a hand over his mouth. Jerry, brave, stupid Jerry, asked, "Can't we just pay a fee to reverse it?" Their lead attorney, dialed in from his vacation home in Jackson Hole, shook his head slowly. This clause was constructed like a kill switch. There's no reverse mechanism. You didn't build one. I didn't even know he had a mechanism, Meredith hissed, eyes blazing. The lawyer was quiet for a beat. Then, you didn't read the supplemental filing attached to the patents. That's where it lives. The trust name is the author. The author was him. You all signed off without due diligence. A silence fell over the room, broken only by the sound of someone knocking over a cup of coffee. Mark finally asked, "What happens if we don't comply?" "Lawsuits. Cease and desist. You'll be infringing on intellectual property the moment the 72-hour window closes. Investors will pull. Clients will pivot. You're effectively squatting on tech you no longer own. 3 of our 5 current contracts are built on those assets," Meredith whispered. "Half our roadmap. Our Q4 earnings." The attorney nodded. "And you'll be releasing statements about delays. Maybe recalls. You'll be lucky if the stock only dips." She didn't sit. Didn't breathe for a moment. Just walked out. Down the hall. Out onto the terrace of the building's 18th floor, cold air slapping her face like a punishment. She dialed. Not her assistant. Not legal. Me. 3 rings. Then voicemail. She tried again. Same. Then again. Still nothing. She typed a message. "We need to talk. This isn't funny." No response. So she tried a voice memo instead. Her voice cracked halfway through. "I don't know what this is, or what you're trying to prove. But if this was about the tarmac, if you felt humiliated, then fine, yell at me, punish me, whatever. But don't destroy everything. Please. We can fix this. Call me." She hit send. Read. No reply. She stared at the screen for a long time, thumbs twitching, until her reflection in the black mirror of the phone caught her off guard. She looked like a stranger. A tired, hollow stranger wrapped in synthetic silk and apologies that were already too late. Back inside, the team had moved on to crisis language for shareholder comms. Phrases like unexpected transition and temporary disruption. The kind of words that say we're bleeding but trying not to show it. She didn't go back in. Didn't need to. She knew what came next. Because this wasn't just a clause. It was a countdown. By morning, Meredith was already 3 espresso shots deep and pacing her home office like a feral executive. Her designer heels clicked across marble like a metronome counting down a death sentence. The sunlight through the windows didn't soften anything. It just exposed the cracks she'd managed to hide in boardrooms. She wasn't used to being the one scrambling for handholds. She was used to being called, not ignored, and certainly not outmaneuvered. She opened her old contact list, names she hadn't touched in years. Consultants, advisors, legal tacticians she'd inherited through him. Men and women who once dropped everything when her husband called, but never once responded to her emails unless he was CC'd. Now she was alone. First, she tried Marcus, the old IP litigator who used to play chess with him after hours. No reply. Then came the venture compliance auditor from Zurich, the one she once called boring but brilliant, after watching him dismantle a competitor's licensing loophole over lunch. The message was marked read within 5 minutes. No reply. She tried calling. Straight to voicemail. It was the fourth call. An older woman named Francesca, a retired equity partner from an obscure boutique firm in Brussels. That finally picked up. Her voice was dry, measured. "Meredith," she said, before Meredith could even launch into her opening script. "I need your help. This thing he triggered, Clause 7.4, it's unraveling everything. Please, I just need to understand. What is he doing?" There was a pause. "Then, he warned you." Meredith froze. Francesca continued. "He came to me years ago. We walked through every clause, every signature, every fail-safe. He wasn't building a company, Meredith. He was building an exit." "I didn't know," Meredith said, breath catching in her throat. "He never told me how deep. He tried. You weren't listening." The line went dead. Meredith stood there, phone dangling in her hand like a dead weight. That sentence wouldn't stop ringing in her head. He was building an exit. She didn't even bother with her bag, just stormed into her car and drove straight to Virionteca's downtown legal office, nearly clipping a cyclist along the way. Security knew better than to stop her. She threw the door open so hard it rattled the frame. "Can we fix this?" she barked before even sitting down. Her voice cracked halfway through the sentence. The chief counsel, a man named Dorian who always seemed half asleep but never missed a detail, didn't flinch. He already had the file open. A printed version. Red annotations filled the margins. "You're asking the wrong question," he said, pushing a thick packet toward her. "The question isn't can we fix this. It's should we have ever ignored him in the first place." "I don't have time for riddles," she snapped. "Tell me how to undo it." Dorian tapped the cover page. "The trust entity that co-authored these patents, for B93, doesn't carry his name, but his digital signature is verifiable. Time-stamped. Authenticated. Witnessed. But he's not listed anywhere public." Exactly. That was the brilliance of it. Legally, he's the architect. Functionally, he's invisible. And that invisibility? It's bulletproof. She sat, finally. The air conditioner above them kicked on, filling the silence with a low mechanical hiss. "If he wanted to burn it all down," she said slowly, "he picked the perfect fuse." Dorian leaned forward. "No, he didn't burn it. He just took his name off the foundation. You were standing on it. Now it's gone." Meredith rubbed her temples, trying to push back the headache clawing through her skull. Okay. Then what can we do? Damage control. Public messaging. Delay tactics. Maybe beg for renegotiation from a position of weakness. But unless you can convince him to reinstate authorship." She looked up. "That's impossible." Dorian didn't argue, because it wasn't a matter of if he would say no. It was that he already had. Silence is a decision too, and he'd made his. Outside, her phone lit up again. Investor calls. HR, PR. And one message marked urgent from a product team in Singapore. Legal just froze Helix OS update. Partner compliance team pulled out. What is happening? What was happening? The tide was coming in. And her empire? Built on sand. Monday arrived with the stiffness of a funeral. Not the loud kind. The quiet kind, where everyone knows what's coming but keeps sipping their coffee like the smell of death hasn't reached their row yet. The boardroom lights were too bright, too clinical, and no one touched the catered breakfast. Not even Tracy, who once swore by sugar-fueled problem-solving. Mark came in 5 minutes late and didn't even apologize, which told everyone just how bad things were. Meredith stood at the end of the long table, face pale, jaw set, hands clenching and unclenching like she was rehearsing a statement and choking on it at the same time. The screen behind her displayed a dashboard, red arrows, paused projects, headlines flashing words like collapse, revocation, partner exit, licensing war. "Let's begin," she said, barely above a whisper. No one looked up. She tried again, louder. "Let's get started. Legal is drafting the framework for an emergency appeal, and compliance is working with PR to—" "Stop," Mark said. Not a question, a command. He leaned back in his chair and folded his arms. "You said he was just your husband." The room didn't move. "I didn't know he was on the IP chain," she replied, tone sharp, defensive, brittle. He never told me. He kept things. Mark blinked once, then turned to the others. She says he never told her. But tell me this. If your spouse owned the foundation of your company, wouldn't you know? Someone scoffed. Quiet, but not quiet enough. Then came the voice that really mattered. Angela, the newest board member, brought in for optics and regulatory finesse. She didn't speak often. When she did, people listened. He didn't have to tell you, Angela said, voice calm, cutting. That's why we hired you. To know what's in your house, what's in your past. And apparently, you didn't. The words hung there. Not loud, just heavy. Meredith's hands dropped to her sides. He was supposed to support me. And he did, Angela replied. Until you turned him into a prop. Someone coughed. Jerry's phone buzzed twice. Meredith's own screen flashed with a new message from Investor Relations. Senior partner from Control just pulled out. Acquisition on hold. We're at DEFCON levels of concern here. She didn't need to read the rest. She already knew. The Control deal, months in the making, was set to finalize this week. The media had been prepped. A joint press release was drafted. But the lawyers had spotted the clause. And Control's general counsel wasn't stupid. Nobody wants to buy a car with the engine missing. We can stabilize this, she said, to no one in particular. We can negotiate directly with the trust. Maybe re-sign. Tracy slammed her palm on the table. Are you listening to yourself? There is no trust without him. And you think, after the stun on the tarmac, he's going to play nice now. Silence again. Then Mark added, honestly, I'm starting to think he never played at all. He built the field. We were just too busy patting ourselves on the back to notice we were standing on his lawn. That one stung. She looked at him like he'd just twisted a knife she didn't know was still in her. I've been CEO here for 6 years, she said through gritted teeth. And I carried this company through. Carried it where? Angela asked. To a place where one man can pull a thread and everything falls apart? The numbers didn't lie. Share price had dipped another 12% since the weekend. Internal confidence was bleeding out. Mid-tier investors were already drafting exit notices. A junior associate from legal quietly slid a memo down the table. Succession options, preliminary discussion points. She didn't touch it. Outside the boardroom glass, the office buzzed like normal. But inside, it felt like watching a dam crack, knowing the pressure on the other side was no longer theoretical. Meredith turned to the projection again, but the numbers had stopped updating. Even the system was giving up on her. Behind her, someone whispered, Clause 14. That's what he called it. She turned. What? Clause 14. That's the nickname floating around Twitter. Investors are using it as a shorthand for what he did. For him. She stared at them, dead-eyed. Then turned to the window. Far below, the city didn't care. Taxis kept moving. Lights changed. People walked. But up here, at the top of the company she thought she owned, the walls were shrinking. And no one was coming to save her. It was around 2:40 p.m. when Meredith's phone vibrated with the kind of force that felt deliberate. Not a gentle nudge. A warning. Her assistant's name flashed across the screen, followed by a single line of text. We have a problem. Check Tech Harvest. She tapped the link without thinking, thumb already slick with sweat. The silent partner who walked and took the contracts with him. That was the headline. Subhead. Sources confirm anonymous IP co-author behind Virion Tech patents resigns, leaving company exposed. Old ties run deeper than anyone thought. The article was brutal. Surgical. A journalist named Dahlia Wu had done what no one in her own C-suite had managed to: uncover the buried bones. She had sourced archived legal filings from 12 years ago, documents tied to a private trust, with exact phrase matches to Virion Tech's core architecture. She linked them back to an original shell company incorporated the same year as Virion Tech's launch. But that wasn't the worst part. Halfway down the page, nestled between paragraphs of careful analysis and thinly veiled mockery, was a photo. Black and white. Grainy. But clear enough. Her husband. Younger, suit slightly too big, hair Messier. Smiling and shaking hands with Raymond Kilpatrick, the now-retired founder of Virion Tech. Smiling, relaxed, standing in what looked like the original office lobby when they still had paper signs taped to the walls and rented folding chairs. The caption, sources suggest he wasn't just a spouse. He was there from day one. She stared at it for a long time. Not just a spouse. No, he had been the one who introduced her to Raymond. That part she remembered, vaguely, like a dream you misfile after waking up. She hadn't thought about it in years. It had been a favor, a passing mention. You two might get along, he had said, offhandedly. She thought she'd earned her seat at the table. Turns out the table was his. Her inbox exploded. Investors, partners, people she hadn't spoken to in years. 2 news agencies wanted statements. One sent a draft headline already set for the next morning. CEO oversight or strategic deception? But it was the hashtag that really detonated everything. Hashtag TarmacGate. Started as a joke. A meme, even. Someone had uploaded a short animation of a man being left on the tarmac while a jet took off, overlaid with captions from Clause 14 and a fake stock chart nosediving in real time. It went viral within the hour. By evening, the hashtag was trending across multiple platforms. A parody account popped up pretending to be her husband, posting cryptic quotes from old contracts and tagging them hashtag Clause 14. One post read, "You don't lose the game when the board laughs. You lose it when they don't know whose board they're standing on." Her board called an emergency video session at 7 p.m. Nobody smiled. Even Tracy, who usually cracked nervous jokes, sat silent. "We need to discuss optics," Mark said first, using the polite euphemism everyone knew meant you. Angela didn't bother sugarcoating it. "They're going to want blood," she said. "And you left the perfect photo for them to point to." Meredith kept her jaw clenched. "So what? I resign, and the company magically fixes itself?" "No," said Dorian from legal, patched in from somewhere in his car. "But it's the only card we have left that shows contrition. The optics of me stepping down in the middle of a panic would at least show you understand what's at stake," Angela cut in. "Right now, you look like someone who lied, got caught, and is now hemorrhaging investor confidence because she thought her husband was a decoration." Meredith's phone buzzed again. A text from her own mother. "I saw the article. Was he really involved that long?" She didn't answer. The walls weren't just closing in, they were being ripped down. Publicly. Mocked. Memed. Retweeted. Quoted out of context. Investors who once begged for meetings were suddenly forwarding polite withdrawal letters. And her board, the one she thought she controlled, was now muttering words like succession, interim leadership, reputation firewall. All because she left a man on a tarmac and assumed he had nowhere to go. But ghosts don't need runways. They just disappear and take the floor out from under you. She landed at the municipal airport. No entourage, no board, no champagne, no one to carry her bag. Just her, a pair of sunglasses she no longer needed, and the silence that now followed her everywhere. It was a silence louder than any scandal she'd faced in her career. Because this one wasn't public shame. It was personal collapse. The car ride took longer than she remembered. The town hadn't changed much, but she had. Everything felt smaller. The gas station she once mocked for selling single roses in water tubes was still open. The corner cafe still had the faded cash-only sign on the door. And the house, his house, technically, though it had once been theirs, still sat on the hill with the same cracked stone path and the dent in the gutter she swore they'd fix in the spring. That spring never came. The gate wasn't locked. Of course it wasn't. He'd always left it open. He said it gave the place a lived-in honesty. She used to roll her eyes when he said things like that. The front door opened before she even knocked. He was there. Older, calmer. Wearing the same watch she'd given him 7 years ago for their anniversary. She had forgotten it even existed. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Not at first. Just the sound of her own breath catching in her throat. "I didn't know," she finally said. "You should have told me who you really were." He didn't blink. Just turned and walked into the living room, where sunlight spilled across an old leather chair and a bar cart he once said was purely decorative. He poured a drink, 2 fingers of something dark and expensive, and didn't offer her one. "I did tell you," he said, without looking up. "More than once. But you laughed." She winced. "I thought you were just being poetic, melodramatic." "No," he said, swirling the glass. "I was being careful." He reached behind a stack of books on the side table and pulled out a folder. Thick, brown, unassuming. He walked it over, laid it on the coffee table between them like an offering or a weapon, depending on how you looked at it. She stared at it. "What is this?" "You already know," he said. "But read it anyway." She opened the cover, fingers trembling. Inside, full documentation of the trust. The original patent filings, author certifications, digital signature logs, and clipped neatly to the front, a printed document titled Clause 14, Trigger Conditions and Transfer Authority. She read the first paragraph, then the second. By the third, her knees buckled, and she sank onto the couch like her bones had lost structure. "This can't be valid," she whispered. "It is. Validated. Filed. Witnessed. You had authority over transferal? Of everything. I was the architect, not the face. There's a difference." But you let me stand there. I let you stand where you wanted to stand. You were so focused on optics. Meredith, you stopped looking at structure. And structure is what holds everything together when optics collapse. She clutched the folder like it could somehow reverse what she'd done. Why now? Why pull it now? He took a sip from his glass. Because you left me on the tarmac. That wasn't, she stopped. Even she didn't believe the excuse forming in her throat. That was petty. It was stupid. It wasn't meant to. He cut her off with a glance. Calm. I see. You reduced me. In front of your board. On purpose. That wasn't an accident. That was a declaration. So I responded. Strategically. She looked back at the document, her eyes scanning the numbers, the chain of custody, the fact that, on paper, he had more authority than she'd ever had. I married a ghost, she said quietly. No, he said. You married a partner. You just stopped treating him like one. She looked up, eyes glassy. Is this final? He finished his drink. You triggered it. And walked out of the room. She stayed there on the couch, folder in her lap, staring at the paper she never thought she'd have to read. Not in this house. Not from him. And for the first time since this began, she realized. She hadn't just underestimated him. She'd erased him. And ghosts don't forget. The morning of the shareholder meeting felt like walking into a hospital right after the heart monitor flatlined. No one said it aloud, but the tone had shifted from, let's contain this, to, let's keep the corpse from leaking on the carpet. The press was already sniffing around the lobby. A cluster of minor outlets lingered near the elevators, pretending not to eavesdrop. A few blue-check Twitter personalities were live-tweeting any exec who passed through the revolving doors. One even called out to Meredith directly. Any comment on Clause 14, Miss Ellison? But she didn't flinch. She kept walking, kept her face neutral, as if holding herself still would stop the momentum. Inside the glass-walled conference hall, the board had arrived early to rehearse. Again, Dorian had prepared a contingency script, dry and careful. Unexpected personnel changes, strategic reassessment, accelerated partnerships in new verticals. Empty language built to stall panic. But panic wasn't listening anymore. The room filled slowly. Not just shareholders, analysts, observers, rival firm scouts pretending to be consultants, and a few old guard investors who smelled blood in the water and came not to vote, but to watch the collapse unfold in person. Meredith took her place at the front with the rest of the board, face powdered, palms damp, spine straight. She stared at the clock. 5 minutes to start. That's when the envelope arrived. No courier. No announcement. Just a man in a gray suit, anonymous, efficient, who walked up to the chairman, handed him the envelope, and walked out again without a word. The chairman frowned, slit the seal, read, and stopped. Everything okay? Angela asked, glancing over. He didn't respond right away. Just turned pale. Not shocked. Not confused. Just resigned. Like a man who'd finally found the missing page of a book and realized the ending was already written. He handed the document silently to Dorian. Dorian read, then looked at Meredith. Oh my God, he muttered. He signed it. Who signed what? She snapped, voice sharper than she intended. Dorian turned the page for her. An acquisition offer. From a competitor. A strategic consulting firm with aggressive IP acceleration branches in biotech and neural interface markets. She recognized the name. She knew the name. They'd tried to poach her last year, and she'd laughed them off. But now they weren't poaching. They were buying. And attached to the offer was a signed consulting agreement. With him. Her husband. Her ghost. The one who now advised their biggest rival and had just offered to buy what remained of Virion Tech's core intellectual property at half its original valuation. Effective immediately, Dorian read aloud. Contingent on full transfer of all affected assets within 45 days. Clause 14 acknowledged and accepted by acquiring party. It wasn't just a bid. It was a message. He wasn't torching Virion Tech. He was repositioning it, absorbing it, rebuilding it elsewhere. And now they could either bleed out slowly or sell. The boardroom fell into a terrifying silence. No one moved. No one breathed. Even the chairman, usually the level head in any storm, set the document down like it was radioactive. He didn't even glance at Meredith. Didn't need to. Angela finally whispered. He played the long game. Meredith said nothing. The projector screen behind them still displayed the meeting agenda, quarterly earnings, market outlook, innovation roadmap. None of it mattered now, because the roadmap had already shifted. And the man they'd left behind? He was already miles ahead. Strategic checkmate. The car smelled like stale leather and drugstore cologne. She hadn't noticed at first. Her senses were dulled, every nerve frayed and twitching. Her bag was crumpled beside her, half unzipped, the folder with the consulting agreement still poking out like an unstitched wound. She hadn't gone home, didn't even think of it, just climbed into the back of a rideshare, gave the address of the apartment she hadn't been to in weeks, and sat in silence while the driver muttered to himself about traffic and toll surges. Her phone buzzed. Not a call, not a text, just a notification from the financial news app she used to refresh obsessively before earnings reports. Breaking: Virion Tech CEO Meredith Ellison steps down amid internal crisis. Her photo was underneath it, the one from her Forbes profile, the power stance portrait with arms folded, chin high, and the caption that once read, "The vision behind the neural future." Now it might as well have said, "The ghost's widow." She didn't tap it, just stared. The notification faded. The silence didn't. No one called. Not her mother. Not Angela. Not Dorian. Not even Tracy, who once said they'd ride or die together through any storm. She'd ridden. She was the storm. And now she was the wreckage. At a red light, the driver shifted in his seat, glanced at her in the rearview mirror. He was maybe in his 30s. All cap, hoodie with some crypto startup logo she didn't recognize. He squinted. "Hey," he said casually, like he wasn't sure if it was a dream or déjà vu. "Weren't you the one who left your husband on the tarmac?" She looked up, met his eyes in the mirror, didn't speak, didn't blink, didn't deny it. He shrugged, turned back to the road as the light turned green. She leaned back in her seat and closed her eyes. Elsewhere, far from glass towers and investor decks, he sat in a quiet bar lit by amber light and the low hum of blues from a jukebox no one bothered to update. It was the kind of place that didn't ask questions, didn't offer congratulations, just served your drink, remembered your name if you came back, and left you alone if that's what you wanted. The bartender looked over. "You want to start a tab?" he asked. He nodded once, calm as ever. "Name it," he said. "Clause 14.